Hi everyone, tonight we're going to be talking about the stained glass windows of Rollstone Congregational Church and their meanings. My name is Amy Larsen, I'm an art historian, and my focus was iconography in school, so this is what I love to do. I'm just going to give you a little bit of a background on stained glass windows, and how it started was that natural light has always been symbolically equated with the goodness and beauty, playing an important metaphorical role. In 12th century France, the stained glass window enjoyed a growing preference among the religious community because of its exquisite relationship to daylight. In his memoirs, Abbé Suger of the Abbey of Saint-Denis equated divine light with the light shining through stained glass windows and gems. This philosophy of divine light reasoned that humans could spiritually experience God through natural light brought through vivid, large-scale windows of art glass. Eventually, the windows became embedded with Christian images. In essence, the windows became didactic in nature, letting the mostly illiterate population visually identify with stories and people from the Bible. This photo right here that you're seeing, this is actually one of the stained glass windows at Saint-Denis. So, with this brief history aside, I just wanted to refresh those who sat in 2 years ago, as well as those joining us for the first time, what iconography is. Iconography is the study of symbols. It also incorporates colors, numbers, etc. Religious iconography is just that, the meaning of symbols in religious art. Some people also refer to this as hagiography, hagia being the Latin word for holy. To get our feet wet, the first window to be discussed will be the Rose Window, which is a depiction of the Madonna della Sedia by Raphael, and he painted this in 1514. I chose this as it is the best example of Rollstone's windows to show how a work of art can be broken down to its pieces. I promise this will be the most in-depth I go on one window. I promise you. This window, although small, is typical with Gothic and Neo-Gothic architecture. During the Middle Ages, there was an increased interest with the Virgin Mary and her role in the Christian religion. This took place mainly in France, where Gothic architecture took a stronghold. Cathedrals were dedicated to her, thus many cathedrals named Notre Dame arose. To honor Mary, they began using a large circular window in the very front of a building called the Rose or the Medallion Window. This usually depicts the life of Mary, her sorrows, her triumphs, and her attributes. In keeping with this tradition, Rollstone too has its window depicting the Virgin Mary. Ours is the depiction of Mary, the Christ child, and John the Baptist. This theme is very common in religious art. Raphael's Madonna is a soft, gentle, loving mother. She holds her child tightly against her. She gazes towards the viewer with a serene look upon her face, while the Christ child looks not towards the viewer, but through them, as if he is seeing his future and what it will ultimately bring. An infant John the Baptist, hands clasped, as if praying, holds the cross, the symbol of Christ's martyrdom. When looking at works of Christian art, one can almost instantly pick out symbols, such as a cross or a dove, and know what they represent. Colors also play an important part in telling the visual Christian story. The colors used in the original painting are quite vivid and harmonious, giving the painting a very calm and warm feeling. Raphael has the Virgin dressed in contemporary Renaissance garb, but wearing a headdress that would be customary in her time. The upper part of her dress is green, which symbolizes nature, spring emerging from the barren winter, and rejuvenation, and red, which is symbolic, in Mary's case, of love. Red is also used as a color for those who were persecuted for their beliefs. The mantle of Mary's dress is blue, which symbolizes the heaven and heavenly love. It is also a symbol of truth, for after the clouds roll away, the heavens appear as if truth is being unveiled. Additionally, blue has become the traditional color of the Virgin Mary and is used quite prolifically in scenes from her life. The Christ child is dressed in gold, a variance of yellow, which is a symbol of divinity. However, during the Renaissance, many artists used the color gold when depicting those individuals who were born into the Jewish religion and converted into Christianity. John is wearing a hair shirt, which goes back to the Bible and can be found in the book of Mark, where John is described as wearing a shirt made of camel hair while baptizing people when he was in the wilderness. This is an overview of the Rockwood Window. It's the first window in our sanctuary. And then this is the detail of the Rockwood Window. So in this window, we see a pastoral landscape. And if you want me to point anything out, I can tell you. The stream is a symbol of life. It's ever flowing until it reaches its destination, whether it's the ocean or another body of water where life ends. The rocks are a symbol of strength, steadfastness, and durability. The most obvious are the sheep, which represent the flock of the faithful. We see lilies, which are a symbol of purity, and an oak tree, which represents strength, faith, virtue, and endurance. The ventilator of the Rockwood Window is the poppy, which represents the passion of Christ, death, and eternal sleep. This is an overview of the Morse Window, which is the second imaged window on the Snow Street side of our church. The Morse Window is that of King David. Here we see his crown, symbol of his royalty. We find him with a harp, as he was the writer of the Psalms. He is adored in blue and purple. Blue as a symbol of heaven and heavenly love, purple referring to love, truth, and his royalty. The ventilator of the Morse Window is an anemone, which stands for sorrow and death. As you can see, there seems to be an overwhelming thing of sorrow and death in all the ventilators. The next window is Christ as the Good Shepherd. Christ being depicted as the Good Shepherd is one of the most commonly used one in art. It shows him as a leader of the faithful, as well as the protective care he has for his followers. We see him holding a shepherd's crook, a symbol of being the leader of the sheep. Jesus is wearing white, a symbol of purity and innocence, free of sin, and red, a symbol of his impending martyrdom. We also find laurel, which represents triumph and eternity. This window actually has a poppy again. This is an overview of the Fosdic Window. And here is its detail. The Fosdic Window is again another pastoral landscape. We see the stream again. On the side of the stream we see irises or sword lilies, which are attributed to the sorrows of the Virgin Mary. Irises, I didn't write this, but irises typically when they open, they resemble a fleur-de-lis. And a fleur-de-lis is one of the signs of Mary. Whenever you see a fleur-de-lis, it's a reference to Mary. So that's why irises always tend to be associated with the Virgin Mary because of their looking like a fleur-de-lis. We find a cypress right there, big tall cypress, which represents death. The mountains in the background are symbolic of being the closest to God. All of these sanctuary windows were installed between the 1890s and 1916. I find this one particularly interesting because if you really look at it, you can see the influence of a famous artist within this depictions. Does anybody have any thoughts?
Water lilies?
if you give up, Vincent van Gogh did a whole study on cypresses. He usually put lawns in the background. This one happens to have a hayfield. Starry Night has a stream running through it. So you can kind of see the influence of the art at the time, what was going on at the time, and it was kind of embedded into the Fosdic window, which I find interesting. The ventilator, we see a pomegranate. The pomegranate is a symbol of the church, many seeds within one unit. It is also representative of the faithful followers of the church. In the ventilator, we have a passage which comes from the Psalm 95, verse 4. In his hand are the deep places of the earth, that the strength of the hills are his also, reminding us that the earth is his from the highest heights to the lowest depths. This is the choke window. Rebecca did a painting of this window. There's a detail of it. This is depicting the ascension of Christ. In the window, we find Christ ascending to the heavens. He is dressed in white, symbol of purity, joy, and the bright light of truth. He is adorned with a halo, symbolic of his divinity. He has his hands placed as if he's blessing those below while going to the heavens above. As it came to pass, while he blessed them, he was parted from them and carried up to heaven. Luke 24, verse 50 and 51. The ventilator of the choke window are white lilies, the sign of purity. As we have already learned, white symbolizes purity, but the lily itself is associated with the Virgin Mary, and as such, it is a symbol of purity also. This is an overview of the Tollman Window. And the Tollman Window is a depiction of St. Paul. Saul, or Paul after his conversion, is seen standing in a Roman landscape. You can see the Roman temples in the background as he was incarcerated in Rome. It was during this incarceration that he is said to have written the epistles, which you can see him holding in his arm. He is also carrying a sword, the symbol of his martyrdom, as he was beheaded by Roman soldiers with a sword. Paul is wearing green, which is symbolic of vegetation in spring, triumph of spring over winter, and as such, the return of life after death. Some art historians have denoted that the color green as a mixture of blue and yellow means charity, the regeneration of the soul through good works. Yellow is a color meaning revealed truth. Yellow is also used quite frequently, as I said before, in religious art to denote a convert to Christianity. Paul is standing in front of laurel bushes. Paul was very aware of the Greek Isthmian Games, where the victor was crowned with a wreath of laurel, which for the Greeks was a sign of accomplishment and distinction. When Paul wrote his first letter to the Corinthians, he stated, "Everyone who competes in the games go into strict training. They do it to get a crown that will not last, but we do it to get a crown that will last forever." That's 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 25. This statement would not be lost on the Christians in Greece, and oftentimes Paul will be found amongst the laurel in art. The ventilator is, again, anemones that we saw in the Morse Window. This is an overview of the Jacob window. And this is probably everybody's favorite window. So this is the Angel Gabriel. It was Gabriel who announced to the Virgin Mary that she was going to carry the Son of God. When he announced this, he carried white lilies, again, both representing purity. He is also adorned in blue, symbolic of heavenly love. Here, he is carrying a banner, "Consider the lilies," which comes from Matthew chapter 6, verse 28. "Consider the lilies in the field as they grow. They neither toil nor spin." This is meant to remind us that God will take care of us. Also, lilies last a very short amount of time, denoting our fleeting time upon this earth, and our focus should not be on the amount of time we have here, but on our real purpose. It is also meant to remind us that we are beautiful in God's eyes. I have always found it interesting that Gabriel, the announcer of new life, is holding a banner reminding us of our potential eternal life. In this ventilator, we once again see more lilies. I've gone through several windows. Does anybody have any questions so far?
Who designs these windows? To
So,
incorporate all these different symbols.
so the maker of these windows, most of our sanctuary windows were done by Spence, and then later Spence Bell. They had combined, two men had combined. It appears that the actual donors chose what they wanted the windows to be of. So that's how it appears in Solon Wales' book, that the donors actually got to pick out their own windows, which would probably explain why we have a window dedicated to St. Paul when we don't believe in saints. We don't typically venerate saints. That's all I know. Now these windows too, I should have probably prefaced this to say that all of our windows, well, not all of them, but the majority of windows in the sanctuary, they are made out of opalescent glass. So it's made in the style of Tiffany, you know, when they cut the pieces, they make the image out of the opalescent glass. When we get to the chapel, that is much different, as Connick had a different approach to his stained glass windows. And what he did was he just put in flat panes of colored glass, and that black paint was applied over it. So it's actually a painting on glass. It's not stained glass as you would think. So in our sanctuary, although you wouldn't want to do it, if you sprayed them with Windex and cleaned them, they would clean. If you did the same thing in our chapel, you would be left with just pieces of red, blue, yet all the imagery would be gone, because if that black comes off, the image is gone, because that's all paint.
I wonder what they cost back in the early 1900s for the people who donated these versus what it would cost for us to replace one of these today.
So, I can tell you that I found some documentation of the chapel windows. When the new chapel was being built in 1937, Jenny Choate wanted the chapel, but she ran out of money. So she wanted stained glass windows in that chapel, but she could not afford the stained glass windows. So the church took a vote, and at that time, they voted to approve the $3,600 to have created and install all the stained glass windows of the chapel. The Tollman window, the one with St. Paul that I just showed you, that is in need of some repair. And 10 years ago, my quote to repair that window was $55,000. And that's just one, and that's not replacing it, that's just merely repairing it. So, a lot of money.
Yeah.
So, does anybody else have any questions so far?
Do they get to pick the colors that are around them? And, you know, do all the colors mean something also?
So, I don't know if they got to pick all the colors around them, but yes, I mean, every color, well, not every color, but most colors have a meaning. Like that's what I was saying, blue is the heavens, obviously green is vegetation, white is purity, red is love, martyrdom, joy, you know, black obviously is death. And so, I mean, I don't know if they particularly got to pick out the colors. I definitely, you see the same colors and the same designs, especially in the ventilators. You see the same, we don't really have, besides 2 windows that are an anomaly, and I'll get to those in a little bit, you see anemone, anemone, poppy, poppy, lily, lily, pomegranate, pomegranate. Like you kind of see, like everything is kind of like in 2s, except for there's 2 rogue windows that just have their own design that I'll get to.
Amy, how far back, and can we go far enough back in history to know why the lily means purity? You know, we all know that in a lot of cases, and not in all of them now, but I mean, it goes back really far in history when those, but did you ever do the research back far enough to find out why the lily was chosen, for instance?
You know, I've gone back as far as I can. You know, iconography came back. Like, iconography really started in the Renaissance, and they started looking at things a little bit different. And, you know, I honestly wonder, I don't know this for a fact, but for instance, like Gabriel, he came down and you know, supposedly when he told Mary that she was pregnant with the Christ child, you know, where she was going to have the Son of God, he presented her with a white lily. So I don't know if the white lily then just took on the purity of Mary because it was given to Mary. You know, just like the sword. The sword is St. Paul's attribute because he was beheaded with a sword. So, you know, I don't know if they just try to take little snippets from the Bible and try to apply it to mean something. And, you know, obviously, in some of these images, I mean, people can challenge me as much as they want. Like, you know, an anemone, you might see a violet. I mean, there's nothing to say that that's not a violet. But to me, it's an anemone because of the so many stained glass windows that I've seen that has that image in it. So I just apply, you know, that that's what it is. So, but everybody, you know, people can say, no, that's not a poppy, that's a rose, or, you know, whatever. So, I mean, it's really, I guess, in the eye of the beholder. So, all right, I'll move on to the next one. So this is an overview of the Sawyer window. And here's the detail. So,
He has shoes on.
he does, and I'll get to that in a second. So, the Sawyer window, of all the windows of the church, I find myself having a great affinity to this window, and I don't really know why. For some reason, this window just speaks to me more than any window. So it's Jesus knocking at the door, and it comes from, listen, I am standing at the door and knocking. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into his home and share a meal with him and him with me. Revelations chapter 3, verse 20. Again, we find Jesus wearing red, a symbol of love, martyrdom. He's wearing white, symbolizing joy, purity, and truth. And he's carrying the shepherd's crook again as the leader of the flock, the faithful. But now, right up in here, just in case this one's kind of hard to see, right there, you see hyssop. And hyssop typically grows in solitary places amongst the rocks and is a symbol of penitence and humility. We also see a vine in the background, and that is a symbol of the Church of God and the relationship of God to his people. I think what intrigues me most about this scene is that there is no doorknob. My former art professor, who is a renowned art historian, and she's gone all over the world, she believes that this is a historical representation and that doors in that time only opened from the inside. That to me makes absolutely no sense. Because that would mean that once you left the house, you're never getting back in, unless somebody else was inside. I believe the reason that that whenever you see an image of Christ knocking at the door, there's never a doorknob. I believe that that is because Christ can't just enter your life. You have to let him in. You have to make him welcome into your life. So that's what I believe, but you guys can all make up your own minds. Oh, so what Kathy was talking about, because she remembers this from years ago. The other thing in art that's very interesting is if you remember the Ascension window that I showed you, Jesus going up to heaven. She said Jesus was barefoot. He had no shoes on. So typically in art, when Jesus or any saint is showed unshod, that means that that particular snippet of their life is taking place after their death. When they're dead, they have no shoes. When they're alive, they have shoes. Now, here's our two little rogue windows here. This is the Rice window. And you can see here, we deviate a little bit. And we have red roses, which is a symbol of martyrdom and love. And you can see here, this is a much later piece of stained glass because you can see that it's more painted than opalescent glass. Instead of the glass forming the images, all this is painted on. So you can definitely see the difference. Then, sorry, I just want to make sure that I'm not going over on my time either. The next window that we have, this is an overview of the Babbitt window. And here's a close-up of the Babbitt window. And the Babbitt window, again, we're seeing the painted flowers. And what we're seeing here is what's called a passion flower. And it's a symbol of the suffering of Christ at the time of his arrest, trial, and crucifixion. The passion flower has 10 petals. So you can see here, I start here, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 at the top, which they denote to mean the 10 apostles that did not deny or betray Christ. They plucked off Peter and they plucked off Judas. So there's the 10 that are left. The center of the passion flower resembles the crown of thorns. And the leaves are shaped like a spear, denoting the spear that Longinus inserted into Christ's side while he was on the cross.
Now, the fact that these two windows have, just have a geometric design and nothing else, does that mean anything, or was it just cheaper?
I think it was just cheaper. I think it was just way cheaper, and we have, I think we only have a total of 4 that don't actually have any imagery. And sometimes I wonder, like, did they leave them blank and then hope that we would get them filled in at some point? You know, if they, I really don't know. But these two windows, you can definitely tell, even though all of them were put in by 1916, this was definitely at the later end of that, because the stylistic approach to stained glass at that point had changed so much that now you have that painted look as opposed to, you know, like the Jaquith window. If you ever have a chance, Joan, you should really come to Rollstone to see the window.
I have been in Rollstone.
Okay, so the Jaquith window actually has ripples in the glass, you know, on a Jaquith window that, you know, just all hand formed, you know, to make it look like a flowing gown. And it's just absolutely gorgeous. So this is the low window. This one, the ventilator, is in a little bit of need of repair, you can see here. And that again has the white lilies, another one of our windows. And then this is the other low window that you can see here. And the medieval rose, which symbolizes love and sacrifice. The medieval rose, sometimes it's called Christmas rose, and then during King Henry's time, when he split from the church, that became the Tudor rose. So, but it's usually referred to as the medieval rose, and you can see here, this window does need some repair too, because the opalescent glass that would have been behind his name is missing. So that one does need some repair too. These are the hardest windows. The front of the church is the hardest windows to take pictures of. These are actually called Bradford Windows, and I will go through each one of them, but I wanted to show you an overview, but then I also wanted to show you kind of what they look like. Here you can see, although it still is opalescent glass, you're going towards that movement of painting the stained glass as opposed to creating the image out of glass. You're painting it on. So you can see it's very, very clearly in her face, all the lines of her robe and her mantle. You know, you can see where they painted that depth on. That's not created by glass. So the Bradford window, all three of these windows depict Mary with various attributes, meaning different things. So this first window, we have her with a cross. So in this particular window, she is representing faith. And you can see the cross a little bit better, and you can see kind of all the twists and turns of her veil and everything else that's painted on there. That's not all lead work. This is the lead work here, but all this is all painted.
So is that makes it so a less expensive window to put in?
It would be less expensive, other than the artist's time. You're not forming the glass as you would be in the Tollman window. And all of our windows that depict any people, their faces are always painted on. Their feet are always, anything that you need great detail. So typically, like if you look at the Jaquith window, or you look at the Tollman window, even the Morse window, all of them, their heads, their faces, and their feet, hands, anything that they need a lot of detail, it's all painted in. So I remember years ago, somebody was trying to clean the stained glass windows. I'm like, don't do that, don't do that. No, don't do that. Leave them alone. They'll be fine. They've been there for 100 years. They're fine. So here is the middle window. And then I'm just going to zoom in a little bit more here. And here you can see a little bit better the curls on her head, all painted in and stuff like that. And here she's holding a lamb. And in this particular window, she's representing charity. I'll just zoom in on this one. And I'll give you $5 if you can figure this one out. Oh, exactly. She's carrying the anchor, and the anchor, what?
I'm collecting.
Exactly. Yes. So, the anchor is a symbol of hope. It represents steadfastness. If you ever notice in Christian art, a lot of times when you see that anchor, if you took off the bottom two, you'd be left holding a cross. So all the anchors typically look like a cross. And so obviously, to recount my rainbow days, you know, what was it?
Faith, hope, and charity.
Faith, hope, and charity, yeah. But anyway, so these windows are very intriguing to me because it's Mary. But if you look at her, she has a veil on. In all three of the windows, she's wearing a veil, which is a symbol of modesty and obedience. However, she does have a halo on too, which represents her divine status.
Does she have wings and all of those?
She does. She has wings in every single one. Again, horrible picture. These are the worst to take pictures of. But now I'll zero in on this one. So here we, again, see Mary, and she is holding her lilies as a symbol of purity, like I've said before. But, you know, she's changed a little bit. She's looking up to the heavens now. These were probably later than the Farnsworth. I mean, I think that they were put in about the same time, but you can see that there's much more folding to the cloth. I mean, they just look a little bit more detailed than the one before. I'll go back to it, but I want you to take special notice of her hair and right above the halo, what she has in her hair, okay? And then this is the next one. And this one, she has the chalice. And so the chalice is symbol of sacrifice. One thing that I want you to notice in this one is that Mary now is wearing a crown, and which is the reward of the faithful who have overcome the powers of death and darkness through their belief in Christ. And also now we can see her assuming her role as being the Queen of Heaven. And this one is Mary representing praise and worship. And typically whenever you see anybody holding a harp or any musical instrument, it denotes praise and heavenly music. Saint Cecilia is the patron saint of music, and you always see her holding either a harp or a mouth organ or something like that. So that's what that denotes. And again, I just want you to take notice to her headdress again. So in the first one, if you remember, she was crowned with laurel, which denotes victory. But in the praise and worship window, she's wearing a crown of flowers, and that symbolizes glory, power, and eternity. So you can see, I love these windows too. I love their faces. They remind me of like Gibson girls or something. Before I get to the Newton windows, does anybody have any questions about these windows?
You mentioned the hair, because there was one in this little section of these smaller windows with the hair kind of sticking up. And then this last one, it was kind of long and flowing. And the color was not something you expected from someone who was from that part of the world.
That is probably true. And actually, I don't know if I can just get back a little bit. Let me just go back here a little bit. It actually works. So this, actually what I wanted you to look at, I just want to make sure that you realize this. So it's right in here. This is all laurel sticking up like crazy, sticking out of her hair. So she still has long and flowing hair, but the laurel makes her look a little bit wacky. But yeah, I mean, and you wouldn't expect it. I mean, just like some people depict Jesus, you know, full beard, the whole 9 yards, and then the other day I have a friend that's Mormon, and she showed me a picture of Mormon Jesus, and he looked like a WWE wrestler, like he was really quite handsome.
I find that all these pictures of Mary in that church, Congregational Church, is kind of odd.
It is weird,
You know,
isn't
kind
it?
of- Yeah, because in Catholicism, Mary is right up there.
Mm-hmm.
And the impression I get from our church is she's not right up there. They don't talk about her a lot. They don't have festivals for Mary. They don't do all, and to have all these Mary windows in the church seems kind of odd to me.
It's very strange. Actually, so with my background in art history, when I first joined Rollstone Congregational Church, when I walked into it for the first time, and I was baptized Congregational, I was raised Methodist. When I walked into Rollstone, I remember asking Michelle Hodges, so when did the church buy a Catholic church? Because I assumed that it was a Catholic church. It has way too many Catholic features in it. You know, from the shapes, we have a lot of the quatrefoil design. We have like the 4-leaf clovers. We have a lot of 3-leaf clovers. We have a lot of the, you know, other symbols. And so, you know, and then the Tollman window threw me off with St. Paul. Mary windows threw me off. So I really thought I was sitting in a Catholic church. I really did believe I was sitting in a Catholic church.
We've had people come in, walk in the door thinking they were coming to a Catholic church and be really surprised.
Especially when we had a female pastor.
Oh, yes.
But it does look very Catholic. It does look like a very Catholic church. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know if, you know, I know that when H.M. Francis built the church, he was sent by the Calvinistic Christian Church over to Europe to study this neo-Gothic architecture that was like all the rage at the time, and that's what Rollstone really is neo-Gothic. And so I don't know if when H.M. Francis, because remember, Rollstone was his very first commission, right? So here he is like a very new architect being sent to Europe to look at churches. But what you're going to find mainly in France and everything else is going to be a Catholic church. So I don't know if when he came back, it kind of that influenced him to create such a, I mean, because you have to admit, I mean, we do have a very, very Gothic looking building. I mean, even, we do. I mean, and it's a fabulous building, you know, but it does have all that dark wood, and even up above, you know, we have all the stained glass windows that have nothing, and that would be typical of a Gothic church. It's called a clerestory, and that's where all the stained glass windows would be at the top to illuminate from this way. So, I mean, even that way, we even have the delineations of tiers like a Gothic cathedral. So,
Amy, do you think it's possible that he was given, I would have thought that the board of the church would have oversight as to what he did, but maybe he was given free rein, and he brought back these images that surprised.
exactly. I have no idea, but you know, so when Rollstone had its little issue a few years ago, and we got flooded, it was very interesting because Paul and I got the opportunity to actually see some of the innards of the church that nobody has gotten to see. And so we were crawling down with the big pieces of granite and everything, but some of the walls came down, and what was very interesting is that you would see the brickwork, and sometimes you'd have a few layers of brick, and it would be like white. Like the mortar would be white, and then the next day, like a few, you know, you'd see a section, but all the mortar would be black, and then it would be white, and then it would be black, and then it would be gray, and like all these different colors. And in talking to some of the older people of the church, the history that's been given down is that the church didn't really have a lot of money to be built, so they would hire craftsmen by the day. And so these craftsmen would come, masons would come, and to do their work, but some masons use black mortar, some use gray, some use, and that's why there's just a hodgepodge inside the church. Like if you took down the walls, there's all different color mortars in there, so it's kind of cool. We will probably just stop when we get to the end of these. We'll probably just pick up the chapel tomorrow night, Thursday night, and then I'll probably end up doing some Lives of the Saints because I got through this way quicker than I thought I was going to. This is one of the Newton windows. And these are at the front of the church. And in each of the windows, there is a little section where there's a little icon. So in this one, you can see we have the A for alpha. We have the alpha sign. Then we have the omega sign. So, you know, I am the alpha and then the omega, I am the beginning and the end, saith the Lord. So that's what that represents. Then we have the budded cross. So there's many different variations of a cross, and the budded cross, I think, personally, is the most interesting because you have a cross made up of 4 little crosses. But then what happens is that, so each one of these has 3, this truffle, that's what it's called, and that's the Trinity. So people will say that these 3 equal the Trinity, you know, each one is representative of the Trinity. But if you take this one and this one and this one and this one, add it all up, now you've got the 12 apostles. Then you take the arms and the arms and the arms and the arms and you've got the 4 gospels. So I always like the budded cross because it's a cross that actually is embedded with so much meaning. So I really like the budded cross. Then in this window, we also find the crown, which is a symbol of victory and royalty. Now this is the other Newton window. I also want to point out here that all up in here, from here, you see a base and then it's going right up. And it's grapes. So, you know, you can denote the Eucharist. You can get the grapes as a symbol of the Eucharist. But also, a lot of times when you see a tree like this, growing upwards towards the heavens, and, you know, you've got the heavens up there, it's also representative of the tree of Jesse. So in this one, we have the IHS, and IHS is the Greek, it's the Greek writing for Jesus. However, over time, some people, and I'm going to kill this, but some people have said that it stands for Isis, hominum, Salvator, Jesus, the Savior of man, in hoc salus, referring to the cross, which means in this cross salvation. Some people say IHS is I have suffered, and other people think that IHS stands for in his service. This is the Cairo, and that is not Jesus in Greek, but Christ in Greek. It is also called the Christogram because it's the monogram of Christ. Some people see the P and the X being together. Actually, it stands for pax or peace in Latin. And it is said that Emperor Constantine, on the eve of a battle, he was a pagan, and he was always waffling if he wanted to be Christian or not. But on the eve of a battle, he had a dream, and in his dream, he saw this symbol. And he was told in his ear, in hoc signi vinces, which means in this sign you will conquer. And he won the battle and instantly converted to Christianity. Again, you see the anchor, which means hope and steadfastness.
What's the other part that's going through it?
You know, it looks like a snake, but I just believe it's the rope that you would throw the anchor to. And a rope typically will signify Christ. Because the rope will signify Christ because the reason that it's a symbol was when he was, during the flagellation, he was tied with a rope so he couldn't move, so the rope becomes a symbol of the passion of the Christ. So, and then this one, so if I asked everybody what is this, what do you think it is?
Star.
Okay, you say a star. Anybody see anything else? The Star of David. So, yes, and the Star of David would be right. However, a Star of David is 2 triangles. So the triangle comes here, the triangle goes there. So they're 2 two-dimensional triangles that are put on top of each other. These, because they interlock, that is actually called the Seal of Solvent. And it's different than the Star of David because the triangles are interlocking. And although the triangles still reference the Trinity, you will see that one triangle is dark and one triangle is light. So it's supposed to denote lightness and darkness, and it's also supposed to denote good and evil. One triangle obviously points upwards, one points downwards, again, good and bad. And so Solomon, who was the son of David, created this seal because he felt that instead of just the Star of David, if you interlock the triangles, it would confuse the evil spirits and it would be more protective. And so what's interesting is I will point out that that is a hexagram. I mean, like, you know, what a lot of pagans, you know, will worship too, but. So we're gonna end the Newton windows. And above the Newton windows is 4 quatrefoils, okay? And this is these these 4 bumps, that's called a quatrefoil. And there's an image in each one, and they're very hard to take a picture of. But this one right here is of a winged man. And so this is a depiction of the Matthew, of the evangelist, Matthew the evangelist. And he appears as a winged man in reference to his detailed account of the incarnation of Christ.
And you know he's Matthew because of the book he's holding?
No. Matthew is always portrayed as a winged man. And then you'll see here in the next window, this is a winged lion. This is Mark. Mark is always a winged lion, because of his gospel emphasizing the royal dignity of Christ, who was the Lion of Judah. The lion denotes dignity, so Mark has been given this symbol. So in art, sometimes you'll see a depiction of John, the evangelist, and then below John at his feet will be an eagle. And I'll get to that, he's on there too. But you'll see the eagle. So the 4 gospels, they each have kind of like an anthropomorphic. So this is a winged ox. And so this winged ox is Luke. And he's a winged ox because his gospel emphasizes the priesthood of Christ, and the ox is a symbol of sacrifice. And then we have John. And John is the eagle because John's gospel is compared to an eagle in flight as it begins with the divine nature of Christ. The eagle represents highest aspiration, inspiration, and resurrection. So, and then I also just wanted to point out that wings, whenever you see wings on the Gospels and everything, or wings on an angel, wings are a symbol of divine mission. So, that's why angels have wings. When the Gospels have wings, it's because of their divine mission. So I'm going to stop it here before we go into the chapel, but does any, and I'll do the chapel tomorrow night, because I think I might have gone over now. Oh no, I got 1 minute. So does anybody have any questions?
How many actual windows are in the church?
So there's 19, but within that 19, like the Newton windows, you have these gospels at the top. If you counted those as 4 separate and stuff like that, then you'd have to add 4, but there's 19 physical windows. Now, the Newton windows are 2 windows comprised of 2 panes. So it's just one casement of a window, but it's divided in half. Actually, it's divided in 4s. So,
Little dormer windows, don't count as far as.
Oh, I didn't count those in there. Like, we have ones up at the very, very top, but there's no imagery in them. There's just, it's
On the-
just
on the,
glass. Yeah, it's just glass. So yeah, these are all the windows that we have in our sanctuary. And I really, really wish that someday somebody could take professional photos of them because it's really hard to get photos, especially of the Newton windows, because you're either standing below it trying to shoot up to it, or then you're down on the sanctuary and it's just too hard to shoot.
You have to be there at different times.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, so we have the Snow Street side of the church, and those windows I find shine the brightest in the early morning. Then we have the Lipton Street side that shine, I think, the brightest at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And the front windows, you have about a 10-minute window between like 12 and 12:08 that you can maybe get a good image, but it's really hard. The front windows are the hardest, but.
And the best view is from the choir loft.
Oh, I'm sure.
Right, Ron?
So does anybody else have any questions? Well, I thank you all for coming tonight, and we will pick up in the chapel on Thursday, and I will probably do a little bit on some attributes of the saints.